Thanks for joining us for Season 3 of the Stories Unveiled podcast. Stories Unveiled exists to create a platform for people to share hope through their personal stories of what Jesus does in their life. Each episode highlights a different guest, just like you and I, wading through this life that can get so messy. I hope this conversation proves helpful and encourages you to go live unveiled. Today, I have Tristi in the studio with me. You may recognize her voice if you listen to the KTSY morning show based out of the Boise area in Idaho. We have also had the pleasure of having her on the Stories Unveiled Conference stage in 2023. Today, she is here to chat about control with me. She has an awesome story about what can happen if we simply relinquish the control we hold so tightly to. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you do the KTSY morning show.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you do for the KTSY morning show?
I'm a host, so I host the morning show. It's from 5 to 10, and it's AM, and it's a lot of music. Play a lot of encouraging music, uplifting music, and talk a little bit in between. Just kind of a random smattering of things. Hopeful news, not like... It takes some work.
Yeah, it's good news. And sometimes it's like sports or it's just like fun things.
Yeah, what's going on with your family, like, wash your water bottle because gross. Just different things like that. Yeah. So really just getting people up, getting them encouraged. If you can start your day off on the right foot, it's always a lot better. Yeah. But it's kind of ironic because I'm not a morning person. So the show's at 5 and I've got to, get up a little before then.
So when do you start your day? Like when do you rise?
4.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That is so early.
It's early.
It's dark.
It is. Yeah. When I first was interviewing for the job, are you a night person or a morning person? I'm like, I am a night person all my life.
Oh my gosh.
How do you think that's going to work out? I have no idea.
We'll see.
Only Jesus. And it's true. I mean, even through, when I first started, I was with Dave. We were Dave and Tristi in the morning for a long time. And so that helps sometimes when someone else is awake. Yeah. You can kind of wake up a little bit will you ask me some questions? I'm about ready to fall asleep. But now it's like I interact with the audience. There's calls, there's texts. And I just, honestly, I'm just like, okay, God, this one's got to be you today because I am tired. And I was just, there's going to be a nap. There's going to be a nap.
Yeah.
And maybe 20% of the time there's a nap.
Okay.
But every other time, I've got 3 kids and I'm running.
Yeah.
But that's another reason why I love the morning shift is because so is everybody else.
Yeah.
And I just love being right in the middle of that with everybody as
getting
they're
ready, going to work, commute.
Yeah.
Because I know we listen to you when I take my boys to school.
That's what a lot of people say. Yeah. And I love that. Yeah. I listened to Christian radio growing up.
Yeah.
I was 10 when KTSY started. Okay. And so I remember growing up listening to it. So it's like a full circle thing. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful. And then I'm done with my day of work. I can rest a little, hopefully, and then get the kids picked up and just do the mom thing, which is really the highlight of my life. As much as I love the morning show and working, my family is really just my prayed for and my joy right now. Yeah.
So how long have you been doing the morning show?
This summer it'll be 7 years.
Okay. And your first time in radio.
Yes.
This is your first time ever working in radio.
Yes.
And you're coming up on a decade. You're just a few years shy of a decade.
That sounds like a long time. But I'm not getting older.
No, nope. Time is standing still in that way.
Yes, good. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, what did you do before radio?
Directly before radio. Wow. What comes right to mind is I was scrubbing toilets.
Oh.
I was cleaning houses.
Okay. As a job or because you were
cleaning was really lucrative.
Okay.
Well, I'm married to a firefighter.
Okay.
And he has been on shift work. So 48 hours he's gone, 96 hours he's home. And on the days he was home, I would just pick up a few extra thises or that's. I substitute taught for a while. I just did a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But when you want to go and have 2 hours of effective, just make the money, cleaning is the thing. And it gave me a chance to in a world of 3 young kids and nothing's ever done, I would go in, clean it, and I'd like be shutting the door on my way out, like, look at what I did. You know, it was so gratifying.
Yeah.
And I was literally scrubbing toilets for these people that I knew, and they're like, we need someone to preach this weekend. Don't you have a degree in ministry? I'm literally in the toilet, you know, I'm like, God?
What?
Is this? Are you calling me back out? Like, I've been serving my family. This has been my mission, my ministry. Not easily accepted either, because when you know that there's a calling on your life and it's such a humble season of life, raising kids is a very humble season of life, especially if you're not bringing in a paycheck. It's like, you know. So are you really calling me from the floor in the bathroom? Is this real? So I just said yes, and it sort of just was this snowball of opportunities that I just kept saying yes to.
That's awesome.
And it ended up here.
So that's actually what I want to ask you about is how did that transpire? So it opened up opportunities for you to just say yes to and walk through doors.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, like the rubber met the road, did you apply for, or were you offered or kind of approached about the position? Because I guess there was an opening, obviously. There was an opening for morning show co-host at the time. And how did that transpire? Tell me about kind of what your life looked like and what happened? Well, Brian is the general manager of KTSY, Barefoot Media.
And I also went to church with Brian. So I was with one of my best friends. We were doing music ministry every week, and some of the parts of that were kind of emceeing the service. I mean, every church is different, but we had times where we would give announcements, and I'd be holding a microphone and whatever, and I would go out and people would have prayer requests or things that they wanted us all talk to God about, and so I would take the microphone, and I did that for 10 years. And
I will say, sorry to interrupt, but I will say you are so comfortable behind a mic.
I am.
And on a stage. I saw that in 2023 when you spoke at Stories Unveiled, but you are so good on stage.
Oh, thank you.
Just like off the cuff, and like you just roll with it. You are so comfortable.
Thank you.
Mic, so.
Well, and I think that's probably how it all came together. I mean, you'd have to ask Brian exactly how it all went, but he had seen me, he'd seen me comfortable. I mean, there's music, right? And then like talking, and that's sort of like the radio.
I like radio.
But what he told me was he was just doing dishes one night and just really put it before the Lord, because he had been kind of coming up against it. Like, I need to find somebody, like God help me. And he said, your name just came to my mind and it wouldn't stop. And so he just said, okay, well, I'm going to put it in her court, and God, you're going to have to do your thing.
He didn't want to say your yes or your no for you.
Exactly.
Like, I'll ask and see
Which I've done.
So have I.
I've done that.
So have I. They're not going to want to.
Exactly.
And I say their no for them.
Exactly. Yes, but he didn't. And what he did was he called me and he said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. Would you and your husband, JD, be open to eating lunch together? I'm like, okay.
I know what this is about.
Because it's a nonprofit radio station. People support it by giving. And so I'm like, oh, we're going to lunch. It's going to be one of those.
He's going to buy us lunch and then he's going to ask for money.
That's what I thought. And that's what my husband thought too. So we were on our way to lunch. I accepted the invitation. We found somebody to watch the kids, which is like
a big deal.
Yes. So we go to lunch and we're like all fancy and okay, well, how much do you think we can do? And what we got to say no, because one income, 3 kids. I mean, anyway, so we go in and he said, I would like you to consider coming and hosting the morning show. I'm like, wait, on the radio?
Floored?
What?
Yeah,
I was completely shocked because I had never done anything like that. I was not looking for a job. I was not ready for any of that. My kid was 1.5. My youngest one was 1.5.
Baby.
And there's a lot that goes on with being at home and the changing of seasons and postpartum and all of that. And I had just kind of come into I'm finally at peace with everything. Thank you, Jesus, for what I have. And wait, what?
Yeah. Kind of like what's the word, like life shaking in the sense of like, it's a huge commitment.
Totally.
Because it's Monday through Friday.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I mentioned before shift work, 48 hours.
Yeah. So 2 whole days your husband is gone. And so you're like, what about when those land on a weekday? Because like logistically it kind of didn't
make any sense at all.
Yeah.
No. And so we said that even just right there at lunch. It was like, well, I mean, you know what he does and you know how that works. He goes, you know what? I understand all of that. And I'm not asking you to figure it out. I'm just asking you if you'll pray about it.
Fine.
Okay. This Jesus-loving girl my whole life. Yeah. Like, of course I'm going to pray about it.
Yeah.
So we prayed about it. And one of the things that he said, well, why don't you just come to the station, you know, meet Dave, be in the studio, see what it's like. You know, you can't make a decision based on something you don't know.
Yeah.
So he invited me to come. He goes, just come for a week. I'm like, heaven and earth will move to have these kids be taken care of, shift work, all the things. So just to come for a week was
took a lot of logistical planning.
Yes, moving heaven and earth. So, but I did.
Okay.
And I came in and I was here at 5 and, you know, met this stranger, Dave.
Dave was a stranger at that point.
And he was lovely. He was so welcoming to me and so just game for whatever it was going to be. He didn't know if it was going to work out. I didn't know if it was going to work. I was pretty sure it wasn't. But he was just so helpful and taught me so much about radio. And he really just ignited my curiosity.
Okay.
And so every day I just got more and more curious about, well, what happens with this and what happens with, I mean, just as technical as the microphone and the sound waves and how everything works and the, you know, the padding on the walls and just everything. And he was answering all my questions. And we had an artist come in, Brandon Heath came in like played his guitar.
And were you like,
I was really nervous that was going to happen. And then he came in a hoodie and reminded me so much of my buddy Cameron, who I've known my entire life. Yeah. And I was like, oh, these are just people.
He's just a normal guy.
These are just people singing songs about Jesus. Like, they're not fancy. Brandon was really humble.
Yeah.
And, I was asking him questions about like what I wanted to know. Yeah. You know, I'm sitting here with 3 kids at home. I'm like, do you have any kids? Yeah, I have 2 kids. I'm like, well, who's with them? Yeah. Like, who's doing the real work? Yeah. You know? And we had a great interaction. And I think that was one of the things where afterward I got some feedback is like, that's what our listener wants to know. Those are the things, like the things that you're thinking, the things that you wonder about. That's why we want you to come and help host, because it kind of rounds out what we're trying to do and reach, you know, the listener, and that's who she is. And I just started to love it.
Well, here's what I love about you is you do often say the things that people are thinking. In a good way, in a really good way. And so I can see that. Yeah. I can see that because you just, you know, I've sat in meetings with you or, you know, whatever, like I'll have something in my head, like, I wonder, and you'll just ask, you'll just say it, or and I just love that about you.
I've learned that over time. I've learned it, like I've been empowered in that. Sorry, I've got like something in my eye. I've been empowered in that over time because for a long time I wouldn't. And then someone else would ask the question, I'd be like, I was thinking that. And so I've just learned to sort of step into that. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. Now it's just a part of who I am. Yeah. So, yeah.
So tell me how it worked out, because you work for the radio station now 7 years.
Yes.
So how did that work out? You know, kind of specifically the journey, because there was probably some faith that you had to have in stepping into this. Yeah. Because you did ultimately decide, obviously, to accept the position, but probably not without strife or not without questioning. And so what did that look like for you and your husband? And then ultimately, how did it end up playing out?
Yeah. Well, it's a little uncomfortable, which I'm fine with being uncomfortable. But sometimes when you're growing in your faith, you get to a place that is really uncomfortable. And I was here and like, I was seeing all these things. My imagination was being sparked. I was, you know, feeling things and like feeling this calling from God that I had known that I'd had in my life. And I was like, it was awakening again. Not to say I didn't want to be a mom or I didn't want to do all these things, but it was just awakening all this in me. And I thought, God is expanding what I'm going to do. And I was so excited to just step right in, like you come up to the sea, like the Israelites in the Bible, and you just like step in the water. And I'm this like, just step in the water, girl. Here I go.
Yep.
My husband, not so much. And that was really uncomfortable for us because I was just like ready to go. And in marriage, you are like tied in together.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about like the oxen, and I know we don't like do that anymore. We have tractors now, but like oxen are like yoked.
Yeah.
And they're like, there's this thing
One
on them.
cannot get ahead of the other. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm ready to go. And he's like, I don't know. I mean, I work for 48 hours at a time. This isn't
everything
just an
lands
opinion.
on you when I'm gone.
Right.
And if you're gone,
exactly.
What does that mean?
Literally. It was a very logical question.
Totally.
And it wasn't questioning, can God do this?
Right.
It was like, no, I just literally need to know. I'm like, I don't know, but I know he will provide. No, but like, I need to know before we say yes.
And I get that, because it's like in his head, he's like, that's all good and fine, but if you accept, like, how, so you're just gonna leave and like our kids are gonna be like, I get, like, it makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Like, I need to know.
I did, but it kind of came down to, he needed an answer. Brian needed an answer. And I was like, so it's either yes or no. And he goes, well, we haven't figured it out. And I'm like, we have to just take a step of faith. I'm ready to do that. Are you ready to do that? And it was like, no, I'm not ready to do that. And then we're like, so he actually called a friend of his. This was on a Friday, like afternoon. He called a friend of his. He's like, I don't know what to do. He goes, well, there's this guy in the Bible. And he was like, Lord, I don't know what to do. And so he put out this fleece, like sheep's, and he's like, have it be wet in the morning and everything around it dry. And then the Lord was like, okay, it was wet, everything around. He's like, okay, just kidding. It probably soaked it up. So have it dry with everything around it wet. Yeah, then that happened too.
Yeah.
And so he just told my husband, he goes, God is not afraid of us asking. He's not afraid of us questioning. He asked him for like just to be very clear with you. Not a sign, but like just ask him to be very clear with you. And so he did, but then he just wrestled all night with it. Next morning, we're going to church. And we're like because I'm like, we're going to church where we're going to worship God, the one who is faithful. You know what I mean? And he's like, we're going to church. And I'm trying to be faithful to God, but I can't see. Like, what is the sign? How am I going to know? So we're in church. And we went to just a fabulous, small kind of country church, amazing, salt of the earth people. The message was about, what do you call that? It's like you give your time and your talent, stewardship.
Oh, yeah. Not just tithing, but stewardship in all areas.
Exactly. So it's a Christian word, but it just basically means taking care of the things you've been entrusted with.
Yes.
And a lot of times in church, it's about money. Because at the end, there's going to be like and we're going to take up an offering or something.
It's your time, talent, and treasures.
There you go. Yes. But this one was really focused on time, which was interesting. And there was a lady who, her name's Miss Laura, and she doesn't mind me sharing the story because it was a real miracle. She was having a really hard time in her life because she had just become an empty nester. Now, I shared my daughter was born 1.5 years before this, so I was in postpartum, and there's got to be something that is called when all your kids launch, and you're alone. Like, it's not postpartum, but it's something.
But it's post-launching, right? Like your children are gone.
We need a name for it. I don't know what it is, but
it's
she
real.
had that.
Yeah.
And so we were sort of similar in that way. And she came over and she said, I'm just so inspired. Like, I have all this time. And she said, I just feel like I'm supposed to help you guys somehow, just to be like, to give my time. Like, I don't know what you guys need.
And she didn't know your situation, right? She didn't know what you were wrestling with.
I just thought, you need to go talk to my husband. And I said, you need to talk to JD.
Yeah.
Because I'm immediately like, I mean, even right now. I just thought, are you kidding me? Like, is God going to really, like right now?
Yeah.
Like in this moment, like God
did he just provide? And I would say she was more than a babysitter, right?
Oh.
But did he just provide like the person that we need to make this happen?
So she came up to my husband and said, hey, I just want to be able to help out your family. I don't know what that means. I don't know, whatever. And that was his sign. And he just, we talked to her and we said, this is not just like a normal helping out. This is a 4:30 a.m. call time.
Yeah.
This is you leave your house earlier than that to get to my house. And she's like, I'll bring my pillow. I'll bring my blanket. I'll just lay on the couch. Because with the shift work, it was like not every day.
Yeah.
It was just when he was on shift during the week.
Yeah.
So it was maybe three or four times a month.
Yeah.
Total.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was so humbling for both of us to think like someone's going to do this for us. And then it was also just the answer that we needed to be able to step forward into the sea and just watch the water recede and just start walking like the Israelites did in the Bible. That's really what it felt like for us. And it was such a relief because we hardly ever disagree. We're hardly ever at odds. And so to be at odds, especially in a spiritual context, was very strange for us. And it hasn't happened since then. But it was just a real uncomfortable faith testing, faith building situation for us just to say yes. Yeah. And so then I thought, oh, okay, well, now that I've said yes and all that was so hard, now it'll be easy. Like, I will, make sure that we've got meals planned and Miss Laura will be there. And, I'll still be able to do all the things that I've done, but then I get to add this other thing.
Yeah.
And just after a little bit of time, realizing that there was a lot more that I had to learn about control. A lot of it, because I was just going to control all of it. Yeah. And look, it fits in the schedule, 5 to 10. I'll be home by 10:30. It'll be,
Yeah. And are you ever home by 10:30?
I'm never home by 10:30. And I had no idea, and I still am learning, the emotional and I don't even know what to call it, but the amount of energy, creative energy that goes into a morning show, it's way more than 5 hours of work when you're done. Yeah. I mean, you are tapped. You just worked a whole day. Yeah. And it's 10 o'clock and everyone's getting into work like all fresh. Yeah. Like, hey, we have meetings. I'm like, I've just worked all day and I'm going into meetings, so it's different. So going home to those babies, I didn't have what I thought I would have. And so I had to learn a lot about what that meant to balance. And I'm still learning all that. Just when I think I have it, I don't. Yeah. And then something else comes up to just challenge me again to realize I really am not in control of any of this. And that's hard. Yeah. Yeah. Even though you're walking in your calling, even though God has answered prayers, even though all these things are lining up, being out of control still feels terrible. Well,
and then even in the decision-making process of even just do I do this or do I not? You were like, I'll just make the decision and I'll just trust. You kind of relinquished that control. But I am a lot like your husband in the sense of, but I need to figure this out before I make a decision. Yeah. I need to know. Yeah. And that very much is my control of, no, I need to control it to make sure that I've got the outcome. And then I'll be like, okay, Lord, see, I told you this is what we're doing. This is,
aren't you for blessing?
Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
I think what I learned too, just as an encouragement for you, is that both of those ways of expressing faith, both are okay. Yeah. I wasn't right and he was wrong, or he wasn't right and I was wrong. It's just that we live out our faith differently.
Yeah, and he wasn't doubting. It's it's just okay, Lord, but logistically,
yes,
I need to, because then the other side is but it's irresponsible to make a decision and not have the details worked out. That's how I could, that's what I think or convince myself. And so that's good. Yeah. So I've heard said by a really great author and speaker that I love, she said, that there is a difference between transparency and vulnerability. And that difference is that transparency talks about where you've been, and vulnerability talks about where you are, like right now.
Got it.
And transparency, I mean, you've been really transparent with this journey, and but it happened 7 years ago, right? And so I just think that this is such a profound thing, because I think that it's really easy for people to be transparent after the fact. And when you're like, but look at how well it worked out. See, like God's got it, like, and it totally worked out. But sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable, like in the moment, and talk about things. So how has walking through this and just like relinquishing control and being like vulnerable in the moment, like talk to me a little bit about a time when that was something that you walked through.
It's just such a good question, Ashley. I think it's a question that we all could just take time to consider, over and over. I mean, New Year's resolution time. Just stop and consider that, because it's been about a year now, so I wouldn't say this is vulnerable in the moment, except that I'm like feeling my tears, so maybe it is. But my dad passed away about a year ago, and it was hard to figure out what you're going to share on the radio. I've had a lot of people help me understand what oversharing, what undersharing. You want to share enough for people to understand that you have a real life, that you have real things going on. But there was a lot of hard in that part of my life with my dad, because he was chronically ill for a long time. He had multiple sclerosis. And it was just hard for me to talk about in any kind of uplifting way. Yeah. And so I really just brushed against it, not very often in the show. I mentioned it one time, and a lady at a Latte.Coffee event came up and she said, I heard you that time when you were talking about your dad and his MS. And she said, I just lost my dad to MS. And I just want you to know that I understand the journey that you're walking. And we just fell into each other's arms and started crying. Yeah. And it was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I barely mentioned it. But in real life, I felt like I could really relate with her and share all of the things. And she asked all the questions. And so that's different than being on the radio. So when Dad was nearing the end, I did share some, but a lot of that, the platform, I guess, of being on the radio in the morning, I had to step away from that, because I was very much responsible for all of his medical care. And I had to step away from being on air and being on the show. And Dave just, managed everything without me, and I needed to go, and it didn't take long. But during that time, I really did want to share, and I wanted to share more, because it's so hard to go through grief and loss. And I never really saw anyone modeling what it looked like to do that. And not that I was going to be like a great model, but I was willing, and I really felt God sort of compelling me to, whatever it is, and to share that. So I took videos. I just got my phone and I took videos of in real time. Yeah. This is what's going on, and we had to call hospice, and this is what happens when you call hospice, and just how I was feeling about it. And I just posted it on our Facebook page, and I thought, if someone's uncomfortable, they don't have to watch it. Right. They're not going to turn off the radio. It's just a different platform to be able to share. And so I did that during that time. Dad passed away, and, the services and all the family stuff and the financial stuff and all of the things that happened after that. I just allowed that journey to be something that people could participate in with me. Yeah. Not daily, maybe weekly. I don't even remember now, but it was very vulnerable for me in those moments. And I I didn't know if it would matter. I didn't know if it would make a difference. Some of it I thought, well, maybe this is just very self-serving. I'm like doing self-therapy or something, which I wasn't doing because I actually do have a therapist. So I did real therapy.
Therapy's good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's helped me through a lot of things. But I've had such wonderful feedback from people who said it was really helpful to them, and even just friends that do what I do. That said, we're learning what it looks like to maybe speak about it without making people uncomfortable. Like you did a good job, and I wasn't trying to do a good job at anything,
right?
But great if that can help more people, encourage other people going through grief, then that's just sort of how this life works. We just kind of help each other along. So I think that's where vulnerability can come. I did talk about it when I came back, and it took me a while to even be able to talk about it without crying.
Yeah.
I've learned now through coaching and practice how to speak through my emotions. Yeah. And that's a gift that I did not have at the beginning of this radio host journey, but I find that's really helpful now, especially that I'm alone doing a solo show, is that there are times in that studio that it is holy ground. And I told you before we started filming today that I'm already wrecked because for 2 hours, people were calling in and just talking about God's faithfulness and his healing power and his redemption. And I'm undone. Yeah. And there are times I get on the air and I have to speak through this lump in your throat. And I have, Kleenexes standing by, and I just do the best that I can. And sometimes it's mumbly. And so, I just do the best that I can just to try to live out the real, gritty, hard, good, amazing stuff that we all go through. And it's never the same every day. It's never the same hour to hour, So a lot of times it'll feel like whiplash in the show, like it's a vulnerable moment, and then we're laughing about whatever, and it's good because we need comic relief. I mean, we can't just stay in this intense place. We've got to laugh, and I've got jokes that I can go to in moments that I need them, or just let's change the subject. And it's the human experience. Yeah. So it's all good. Yeah. It's all here.
And I love that because it's funny, it feels a little full circle in the sense that this is the Stories Unveiled podcast, and Stories Unveiled is, the organization, and it's, it started as an event, and now it's a podcast to be able to give a platform for people to just be real.
Yes.
To just share their stories, and not in a self-serving way, not in a way that is, we're not here trying to glorify Tristi.
Oh no.
And I know that's not your intention, and it's not mine. My intention is always to be able to offer a platform for people to share their stories of what God does, what he is doing, what he has done, how he shows up for people in their healing, in their redemption, in their broken grief, in all of the places, because just like at that latte da, the woman was like, I saw you, you may have brushed this topic, you may have barely said something, but I heard you and I saw you. And even though you maybe didn't share a lot, she immediately had a connection because she lost her dad to MS too.
Exactly.
And it was she was given that opportunity to tell you that. And then it's man, God, our stories do matter. Being vulnerable and being able to share, this is what I'm walking through. This is what God's showing me. And here's how he's working on me and the situation and all of these things. And it might be hard. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's really good things. But unfortunately, life, sometimes it's really hard. And, but God sees us and people see us and our stories matter.
Absolutely. So. And I think sometimes, especially growing up in church, you hear the word testimony. Yeah. And you're like, that sounds like a scary word. What does that mean? And I remember being a little girl giving my life to the Lord as young. Yeah. And it was you have a testimony, you can share that with somebody. And I was so intimidated by that because I thought testimony meant, like something the pastor would do from the front, something that someone else did.
Yeah.
I didn't understand as a 10-year-old that testimony just really meant God in my story. Like, that's it. God in my story. And I had some hard stuff in my story. And I had a teacher challenge me a few years later and said, you can choose to use this hard thing that's happening to you right now to help other friends, help other kids that are going through the same thing. You can choose that this hard thing that's happening can actually help somebody else. That's your choice. And I was 12 or whatever I was, and I was so empowered by that.
Yeah, the freedom actually that's in that.
I just thought, you mean I don't have to wallow around and be forever scarred and like just like always be ruined, always be, you know, mad and upset, and this happened to me, you know, whatever. And I was like, you mean like, that is what God is doing. He's redeeming our stories when we can use the things that he's walked us through, and he's walked me through a ton of stuff. And when I interact with someone who's going through one of those many things that I've gone through, I really do, I think, thank you, God. We can relate, and I can encourage. And I really feel like that is one of the things that God has called me to do in this life, way before radio, way after radio, is to encourage. It comes so easy out of me, and I've walked some really hard paths. So I can relate to a lot of people and give them courage. Like, encourage, give them courage to just keep walking one more day. Keep praying, keep knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I know because I've seen it. And then I'll go through something else. Like, I know because I've seen it, or I'm going right in the middle of it. Like, someone tell me that there's a light, because I know, but I don't feel it right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that anybody who has gone through something, like you said, what did you say? Vulnerability and, transparency. Anybody who's gone through something that feels healed enough that you're not going to like bleed all over somebody, to just be empowered. Absolutely be empowered, because your story matters, and the encouragement that can come from sharing your story. You don't have to be behind a microphone. You don't have to be on a stage. You don't have to be on a radio show.
Or a podcast studio.
Or a podcast.
Or anywhere.
Any of that stuff.
It's the one-on-one. It's the...
It's who God puts in front of you. Yeah. And I pray that with my girls. I have 3 daughters. We still pray every night before they go to bed.
Same.
Yeah,
and
good.
My daughter's 18. Well, I've less prayed with her before bed, because she has her own prayer life for sure, but I still tuck all my kids in, and I pray with my boys before bed.
Yeah, and it is a gift. And I'll be where Miss Laura was with the, once it's all done. But we pray every night, give us rest so that we have what we need tomorrow to do whatever you're putting in front of us to do. And I'll pray for them that they would see someone who God is putting in their path to encourage or to be kind to, or whatever. It's not, and that changes it. It's not a duty. It's not like we wake up and we're Christians, and so we have this duty to go out and be kind and perfect and all these things. It's like, no, we just have, we just show up and we say, okay, God, who are you putting in my path today? Like, oh, I'm doing the radio show today, and then I'm doing this podcast thing with you. Like, okay, God, like, take it, whatever it's going to be today, and whatever I'm going to say today, just take it and use it for your glory. And you can do that in 3rd grade on the playground. And you can do that in high school when your friend just got her heart broken. You can do that in those moments, and that's so impactful in someone's life.
Yeah. Okay, so I usually wrap the show similarly with every guest as like a reflection. So I just want to ask, what would you tell younger Tristi, knowing what obviously you still have a lot of life, but younger Tristi walking through some really hard things. What would you tell younger Tristi, or a guest who, somebody who's listening to this, you know, a podcast listener, I should say, what would you tell them to encourage them? Because you are an encourager. What would you tell them to encourage them in this area of relinquishing control and even just sharing your story? What would you say?
I was given a gift very, very young. My parents got divorced. It wasn't comfortable at all. My mom moved away to go try to kind of start life over. The intention was for us to come with her, my brother and I, and then that didn't work out. And so I didn't know that it was abandonment until I was in counseling, realizing that I did feel abandoned as a young girl, you know, by my mother. And I was in counseling working through what that feels like. Anybody who knows, a lot of people have abandonment issues, knows kind of what that is. And as a young preteen, I was given a gift. And that is what I would tell my younger self, and it's what I would tell anybody. I was given a gift that day by my counselor. I believe it was spiritually discerned. I just pictured myself at a train station, standing there. The train had gone. I was all alone, and that's how I felt. And it was really helpful because I'm very visual. So I visualized that I was alone. And my counselor said, now just this very prayerful, obviously godly woman. And she said, there's someone behind you. Who is it? And I just imagined, and I turned around, and it was the most loving, kind, beautiful. It wasn't even a face. I can't even describe the features, but it was just this warmth. And I realized that it was Jesus. And he was there. I felt alone until I turned around.
Yeah.
And that was my encouragement from her that day was, you're never alone. As alone as you can feel.
Yeah.
You are never alone. And I felt like that was such a gift from God that day to younger Tristi, to know that I am never alone. And I have leaned in to that picture.
Yeah.
I have gone and stood on the dock, you know, looking out at a lake, and I have literally just turned around, physically turned around so that I could feel his presence again.
Yeah.
And again. And again. And I would say to her and to anyone else that whenever you feel powerless, whenever you feel lonely, whenever you feel confused, whenever you don't know what to say, whenever you don't know what to do, a problem is too big for you, it just helps so much to know that you're not alone. And in a very tangible and real way, God is with us. His Holy Spirit is here dwelling in us. And for us to lean into that and believe it and allow that to empower and encourage us, I think is just, any of us have access to that. It's not just me. It was not just for me that day. It's for all of us. So that's what I would say. It's just to know you're not alone and lean in to that faith that you've been building. And it'll get stronger, but it is a gift. Yeah. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit. And he is always with us.
Thank you so much, Tristi. You're a gift to me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or a review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.